Are you ready to level up your Excel skills fast? Whether you need a quick refresher or you're learning Excel for the first time, this 1-hour course will take you through the essential formulas, functions, and shortcuts you need to start working confidently with spreadsheets. When you're done, you'll know all the time-saving hacks to make your workflow more efficient and impress your friends and colleagues. Let's get started. When you look at Excel, you're basically looking at a really large spreadsheet, meaning columns and rows that help you organize data. But it's a spreadsheet that can do all the stuff we can't do on our own or quickly enough, like calculate, visualize, and analyze large pieces of data in a fraction of a second. This will help you to improve your decision-making abilities and be proactive since you're getting information faster. By the end of this 1-hour course, you'll be able to navigate your way around an Excel workbook, and you'll learn how to use some of the most common formulas and functions in Excel. You'll also learn how to simplify large amounts of data and visually represent data by using charts. We'll look at real-world scenarios of what you're learning and give you access to free downloadable practice worksheets so you can instantly see how this knowledge will be useful to you at work or in managing your personal life. You'll see a noticeable improvement in your efficiency and productivity. And importantly, so will your boss and coworkers. So let's get started. It'll be time well spent. First, let's figure out how to move around in an Excel document and what we can expect to see. We'll start with a blank Excel workbook. A workbook is made up of one or more worksheets, which is what we're looking at here, one worksheet. The worksheet is an almost endless display of rows and columns running from left to right and from top to bottom. Worksheets are sometimes called sheets for short, and the first sheet is given the default name Sheet 1 by Excel. The name appears here at the bottom of our screen. You can move up, down, left, or right on your sheet by using the scroll bars on the right of your screen or on the bottom of your screen. You can also use the scroll wheel on your mouse or the arrows on your keyboard. At the very top of the screen, we see the ribbon with green tabs like Home, Insert, Page Layout, and so on. And each tab that we click on offers a different group of command or instruction groups. For example, on the Home tab, we can see the Clipboard group, where we can cut, copy, or paste text. There's also a font group where we can customize the appearance of the text on our screen, and so on. You'll notice that each time that you click on a tab, the menu options will change. That's just like your other Microsoft Office applications like Word or PowerPoint, so we won't spend too much time on this. What we do want to point out is that there are some menu sets that'll only show up when certain types of data are selected. These are called contextual tabs. For instance, if I had an Excel chart within this worksheet, let's place one here, and the chart is selected, then the Chart Tools tabs show up. This allows me to perform actions that are specific to that type of data. If I click outside of the Chart Tools tab goes away. Let's delete that chart. Just below our ribbon to the far left is the name box. The name box tells us the name of the cell that's currently selected. The cells are the thousands of little rectangles that make up our sheet. Each cell has a unique name based on its row and column. Cells are named using a column first, row next convention. Our name box tells us that right now we're in cell N6. Column first, row next. Cells can have one of 4 things inside them. They can have numbers, they can have text, they can have a formula, or they can have nothing. Just to the right of the name box is the Insert function shortcut. We'll come back to that later. To the right of the Insert function box is the formula bar. The formula bar tells you what was typed into the highlighted cell. For instance, sometimes a cell displays a certain value, but that value was calculated by Excel based on a formula that you typed in. Well, the formula bar will show you exactly what was typed into that cell. So let's look at cell A3, which shows the number 3, but which really was a formula, equals 1 plus 2. The formula bar tells us that this was what was typed into that cell. So we just learned how to navigate around our worksheet, how to make reference to a cell, and what we can find on the ribbon. Let's use this information to get more out of Excel. Let's start using Excel to do some practical tasks. You might have heard about functions and formulas, and maybe you've even heard them being used interchangeably. Well, they're not exactly the same. So what's a formula? A formula is really a command to do a calculation created using one or more of the basic math operations: addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division. In Excel, a formula always starts with an equal sign. When you create a formula, it means that you are entering the math operators yourself. You can create a formula using values like this. Let's start with our equal sign, as we mentioned before, and let's say we want to add two numbers, 25 and 5. We type equals 25, the plus sign, and the number 5, and hit enter. The value is displayed in our cell, and the formula is displayed in the formula bar. What about subtraction? That's easy too. Equals 25, the dash sign for our subtraction, and our second number. For multiplication, we use an asterisk, and for division, we use a slash. We typed our values directly into the cell, but we could have also used cell references. Let's say we wanted to add two numbers, the numbers in cell A1 and cell A2. We could have typed equals A1 plus A2. So that's a formula. On the other hand, a function is a pre-built formula within Excel. Functions save us from having to build a task ourselves. So just like formulas, they do begin with an equal sign, but then each function has a given name that's defined within Excel, and then it's followed by open parentheses and the arguments that are needed to do the calculation. Once we're done entering the arguments within our function, then we end with close parentheses and hit enter, and the value is calculated. Let's say we wanted to find the average of the four numbers that are in column A. We would start with our equal sign and type the word average because that's the name of the function. We open parentheses and notice that Excel helps us by telling us what the arguments are. What's the syntax of this function? It says that we need one number and then a comma and then our second and third and so on numbers. All the numbers after number 1 are in square brackets because Excel is telling us that these arguments are optional. So let's get started. Our first number is the number in cell A1. We type a comma for the second number and click cell A2 and so on, comma A3, comma A4. Close parentheses, and we've got our average. A quicker way of performing this average function is to use the cells in column A as a range. They're all next to each other, so we could have simply stated them as a range instead of typing commas in between each number. It works like this. We type the equal sign and the function name, open parentheses, click the first number in our range, hold all the way down, we drag to the last number, release, close parentheses, and hit enter. We've got our average displayed as expected. So you can see that having functions in Excel is pretty useful. The thing is, there are hundreds of Excel functions, and it's impossible to know the name of every one, especially if you're just getting started. And that's why the insert function shortcut is so handy. Let's say you wanted to add the four numbers in column A, but you weren't sure of the name of the function. So here's how we can get Excel to insert the function even if we don't know the name. We click on the insert function icon, and a dialog box pops up saying type a description of what you want to do, and then Excel will recommend a function to you. So we know that we want to add the four numbers, so we type add numbers, and 3 functions are recommended. For each function that we select, a short description of what the function does is stated within the dialog box. This one is the one we want. It says the sum function adds all the numbers in a range of cells. That's what we want to do. We can hit OK, and another dialog box comes up with the function arguments that are required. It says we need the first number. We can click directly on the cells that we want added. So the first number, and then for the second number, the third, and so on. While we're clicking these numbers, Excel is performing the calculation and giving us the result. It says the formula result will be 180. So that's pretty neat. And we hit OK, and the result is displayed here. We look in the formula bar, and now the function is typed in. Of course, now that we know the name of that function, we can remember it for future reference if this is a function we'll be using frequently. We can use a range the way we learned earlier. So let's type equals, sum, open parenthesis, click on the first number, drag all the way to the last number, close parenthesis, and enter. And there we have the sum function performed as a range. Let's say that we wanted to multiply this total by the number 10. This cell already has values, so we really want to edit what's in this cell. There are a couple of ways we can do that. We can either click the formula bar directly and type what we want. Remember, we want to multiply, so we type an asterisk and the number 10 and enter, and the total is displayed. Let's say we didn't want to do it that way. We can Control Z to undo what we just did. And there's another way to edit a cell that has values. We can double click on that cell. And then we're inside the cell. We click on the location that we want to start typing, and we type our multiplication sign and the number we want to multiply by. Let's say we didn't want to do it that way. There's a third way. The easiest way to do this is to click on that cell and hit F2. Then we're right in the cell and the cursor starts flashing at the end of the values. We type our asterisk, the number 10, and enter. So we just learned the difference between functions and formulas. We built our first function, our first formula, and we even added extra arguments to our formula. In our next lessons, we'll look at some practical applications of how doing all these tasks can make our work easier. Let's look at how we can use what we know about formulas and functions to quickly answer questions from raw data. In our first example, we operate a small stationery store, and we've been using Excel to track the number of items sold between January and March. We'd like to simplify this data by looking at these sales as a quarterly figure. First, let's add the number of items sold each month and place that number in column E, Q1 items sold. Which is better to use? A formula or a function? Well, the sum function was created to do exactly this task, so let's use it. We start functions with an equal sign, then the function name, and open parentheses. So in this case, our function name is sum. We start with our equal sign and the word sum, open parenthesis. The numbers we want to add are right here, January, February, and March. We can just click on the January number and drag all the way to March to create a range, and close parentheses, we hit enter, and our value is displayed. If we click on that cell, then we see the formula displayed in the formula bar. Now we want to do the same thing for each item. We remember that even though what we're seeing is the result of the formula, the actual content of the cell is the formula. So if we copy this cell, what we're really copying is the formula, not the value of the cell. That's important. Now, generally speaking, cell references in formulas are relative. So in our case, our range started 3 columns away in this same row and ended 1 column away in this same row. We want Excel to perform the same relative calculation to the cells below. We can go to the clipboard menu, click Copy, highlight the cells that we want the formula to be in, and then click Paste. But an easier way is to click on the little square in the lower right corner of the cell that you want the formula to be copied from. This is called a fill handle. And drag that fill handle all the way down to the cells that we want the formula to be in. And our formula is copied. We notice that our first cell, E6, calculated the sum of B6 to D6, but E8 calculated B8 to D8. So it copied the relative formula, and that's exactly what we want. So this looks great. Now we want to know how much money was made from the sale of each item. Column G is where we'll want that information to show up. And how do we get that figure? You guessed it. We can multiply the sales total by the unit price, and that's a formula. Remember that to perform a multiplication task, we use an asterisk for the multiplication sign. So our formula is just equals this value times this value. Excel picks up the cell references E6 and F6. We hit enter, and it calculates the value of the formula as requested. And to copy this formula to the remaining rows, we use the most efficient method, which may be clicking and dragging on the fill handle, or simply double-clicking on the fill handle. It copies all the way to the end of the data set, and our values are filled in. So now we know how to copy a formula from one place to another. The real power of Excel lies in how quickly it helps us to simplify large amounts of data to help us gain a better insight to make decisions. At our local high school, we have a group of 10 students who are on the honor roll this year. The school principal wants to use this group's exam results as a benchmark to decide if the coursework was set at the right level of difficulty. Were the exams too hard for our top performers, or were they too easy? So let's start by checking how many of these students achieved the 70% pass mark and how many didn't. First, let's go to the bottom of our data set and type the word passed in one row and failed in another row. In each column, we'll want to get the respective number for each subject. And we know that if we get at least one result first, we can always copy the formula to the other cells later. Now, we don't know the name of the function, so let's search for it. What do we want our function to do for us? We want to count the number of cells that are 70% or higher, and below that, we'll want to count the number of cells that are lower than 70%. So we're counting cells based on a criteria. Let's click on our Insert function shortcut right here. And within the search box, let's type cells that meet criteria. We click Go, and there's one function recommended. It says that this function counts the number of cells within a range that meet the given condition. The countif function sounds great. That's what we want. Now, sometimes the language we use in our search won't return a function that satisfies our need. When that happens, we can use the drop-down list here to search for a function by its category. That same list of categories also appears here by clicking on the Formulas tab and looking at the function library. Within each category, a list of functions appears, and if we remember that function names are meant to be as descriptive as possible based on what they do, that helps to narrow down our choices. So let's get back to our students. We did like the countif function, so we go back to the Insert function, and we can go to Most Recently Used and select the function we liked, our countif function. So we click OK, and a little wizard comes up. We'll use that to supply the needed arguments for the function. For this function, 2 arguments are required. The range of cells that we're concerned with, that is, where do we want to look, and the criteria that they should satisfy, that is, what do we want to look for. Where we want to look is right here, B5 to B14 for our first subject. We highlight that right on the worksheet, and it's populated within the wizard. And our criteria, we want to look for anything that's greater than or equal to 70%. We click OK, and it says 8 students passed the visual arts. We also look at the formula bar and see how the formula that we typed in from the wizard is represented. Notice the double quotation marks around greater than or equal to 70%. And how many students didn't pass the visual arts? We know that there are 10 students in all, so the answer is going to be 2. But if we were working with larger numbers, we wouldn't want to run the risk of a manual calculation, so we'd use a formula. Let's practice doing that. We copy our formula to the cell below, and we adjust our criteria because we want students who got less than 70%. We type the less than sign, and we hit enter. But instead of seeing that 2 students failed, it says only 1 failed. Why? Remember that cell references within formulas are relative unless stated otherwise. So when we copy the formula from B16 to B17, it shifted the student range down by 1. Let's click on F2 to get inside that cell, and we see what happened. This student was excluded, and a blank row was included because the range was shifted down. Now we don't want that to happen. We want our row numbers to stay put throughout our calculation. What we can do is to pay the row numbers to stay put, and we call that making an absolute cell reference. How do we go about doing that? We go to our original formula and we put a $ before those references that we don't want shifted when we copy our formula. So now let's copy this formula to this row and adjust our criteria again to read less than 70%. And now it shows the correct number. 2 students failed. This looks good. So we'll copy our formula to the remaining subjects, and we have all the figures we need. Let's say these 2 sets of numbers aren't enough to provide the answers that we're looking for. The principal thinks that if she knows how many students did really well and how many did really poorly, she'd be in a better position to determine which subject tests require a closer look. So let's check how many students got 85% or higher. Let's put a label excelled here. And what about those who struggled? Let's say they got less than 50%. Let's put them in this row here, struggled. And let's copy our formula. Adjust the criteria. Excelled is greater than or equal to 85%. And for those who struggled, we copy. And they would be less than 50%. We make sure that everything is within double quotes. And we copy to the end. Now we have the numbers that we want, and we can present this information as a tool for further analysis. When you open a brand new Excel worksheet, you'll get some defaults that you'll likely want to change later. Here's why. When you start entering data, it may not conform to the default column width or row height, so it may look something like this sheet, a bit jumbled and not too presentable. And good-looking data is almost as important as accurate data. The first thing we notice on our sheet is that the word sharpeners has a few letters cut off. This heading, Q1 items sold, has letters spilling over to the other column. So let's fix those first. The quickest way to make a column wider is to double-click on the column divider once we see this little black cross showing up. We double-click here, and what it's done is to make this column as wide as the widest values in the column. Well, that's a bit too wide, and we'll have a solution for this title later. So let's get back that little black cross, click, hold, and manually adjust the column width by dragging to where we want it. This looks good. Column E is also too narrow, so we double-click, and it automatically adjusts the width. Now we can see all of our data, but it could be more visually appealing. Maybe we can start by fixing the name of this data set. This title applies to all the data that we see here, so it makes sense to run it all the way across. We'll highlight all the columns with data, and just for this row, we'll merge them so we get a nice centered title. You'll find Merge and Center on the Home tab under the Alignment group. We click Merge and Center, and now it's spread all the way across the first 5 columns. Our default font and size is Calibri 11, so let's start applying some style to our title since we do want it to stand out from the rest of the data. We can look for the Styles command group on the Home tab, and we'll see an option called Cell Styles. We click on the drop-down arrow, and we see a couple of options for titles and headings. Let's click this one for title. And it's applied. The row height got automatically adjusted, but sometimes it doesn't do that. And of course, we can just double-click to make sure that it's the right height for our text. We can apply a style to the dataset itself too. Let's select the whole area, go back to our Cell Styles menu, and we can select any of these from the gallery. Let's go with a light blue to complement our title. And we can make the row and column headings stand out too. We can make them bold, and we can do it all at once. If we want to select non-contiguous data, we select our first set of data, then press Ctrl on our keyboard, and while holding down the Control button, we select the other piece or pieces of data that we want to perform the same action to. If you're using a Mac, you'd use the Command key instead of the Control key. We release. We can see that both sets of data are highlighted. So now we can just click on the B in the font group of the home page to make those values bold. And our data is looking better already. Finally, if we wanted to make several rows the same height all at once, we just need to hover over the first row until we see a black arrow and drag down to the last row. We can right-click and we'll see row height here. We see that our row height is 15. What if we wanted to make it just a little taller, maybe 17? We see that all the selected rows have been adjusted to a row height of 17. Let's undo that. We'll click Ctrl-Z. There's another way to do it. We could have done it manually by just getting that little black cross and clicking on any one. Once they're all highlighted, then they'll all get adjusted to the manual height that we made it. So now you know how to make your raw data look a bit more professional and presentable. Number formats are used to control how cells with numeric data appear in Excel. Numeric data can mean dates, time, money, percentages, and anything else that looks like a number. The most important thing to understand about number formats is that they only affect how the number looks. They don't change the actual value of the number that Excel uses in calculations. Let's take a look. The most common number formats are available on the Home tab of the ribbon in the Number command group. There are some shortcuts for the really common ones and a drop-down for the others. To apply a number format, just select one or more cells and choose a format. Remember that number formats will only change the way numbers look. They have no effect on text. On our worksheet, we have the unit price and the sales totals of each item entered in columns F and G, but they're not looking the way that we expect. These figures don't look like currency. Updating their appearance is as simple as selecting the cells that we want adjusted and choosing the number format that we want. In our case, we can just click on the $ here if we want dollars, or we can click the drop-down for more options. We could go with euros, yen, or pounds, but it says dollars here, so let's select dollars. We see that it changes our number format from general to accounting. We could have also selected a format from the drop-down here. There's also this option called currency. And the main difference between currency and accounting is that the currency format places the $ right next to the number. Let's take a look. So the $ are here, and $0 values show up as 0.00. Let's quickly do that here. That's what the currency format looks like. Let's Ctrl-Z to undo and see what the accounting format does. Remember, the shortcut for accounting is just to click on the $. And if we did 0 here, it displays as a dash and places the $ to the far left. So let's undo. Our unit price is 90 cents, and we'll select the entire area and make them one format, accounting. If you want to see all possible number formats, you could just go to our drop-down and click on More Number Formats here. And there are lots of categories with different ways that you can display your numbers. Of course, this is Excel, so there's a quicker way to display all the number formats. The very quickest way is to do Control-1 if you're using a PC, or Command-1 if you're using a Mac, and the exact same dialog box shows up. We escape. This needs to be changed to accounting also. And let's get our date entered here. March 31 is the end of this quarter. And it shows 31-MAR, but what if we didn't like that format? We can do Control-1 or Command-1. And we want this formatted as a date. And let's choose the format that we like. And it now says March 31, 2020. So just remember that number formats only affect the display of a cell value. It doesn't affect the value itself. So don't be scared if a number doesn't look the way you expect when you enter it. Check the format and fix it if needed. In this lesson, we'll learn how conditional formatting can turn boring numbers into meaningful and interesting information. We have the exam scores of 10 students on this spreadsheet. We want to know who was the top student for each subject. To gather this information at a glance, conditional formatting is a really helpful tool. As the name suggests, Excel enables us to give cells a certain format based on a condition that we specify. So if the value in our cell changes, the format will change too. The conditional formatting command is located on the Home tab under the Styles command group. First, we should select the range of cells that we're looking to apply our conditional formatting to. In our case, it'll be each subject, one at a time. Pretty much we're asking which score was the highest in this subject. So we highlight the first range, that's B5 to B14, and click on Conditional Formatting. This down arrow gives us a couple of options. Each option expands into more specific options for the type of conditions that we'd like to apply to our data. Here's one that catches our attention: top/bottom rules. Since we want the top scorer, maybe this will give us what we want. It mentions top 10, bottom 10, above and below average. Well, we don't really want any of those, but maybe we can adjust one of them to what we want. Let's click on Top 10 Items. A dialog box pops up which says, Format cells that rank in the top 10. Well, the 10 is adjustable, so let's change that 10 to a 1. And since we're looking for the top performer, let's change the color from red, and it can be any color we want. We can customize the format. But green is here and we like green, so let's choose that. We notice that while we're working, Excel is working in the background to show us what our data will look like when we're done. We click OK, and now we know who was the top student in the visual arts. Now we want to apply the conditional formatting to the other subjects. There's a shortcut called a Format Painter. The Format Painter can copy the format to the other cells that we want. So we select our range, double-click on the Format Painter. It's on the clipboard command group and it looks like a little paintbrush. We double-click because we're going to select multiple ranges. And then we can highlight each range as we go along. And we can just click on the first row. And it's highlighting each student who got the top score. We hit Escape to deselect the Format Painter, and we're done. Now we have the top achiever for each subject area. Of course, with the conditional formatting tool, we can also quickly determine which students will remain on the honor roll next year. The honor roll requirement is an average score of 80% or higher, so let's figure that out. This column has each student's average, and we want to put our condition in. So let's highlight and go to Conditional Formatting. This time we want to highlight cells. The scores that we're looking for are 80% or higher. We can't select greater than 80% because that would exclude students who got 80%. And we can't select greater than 79 because that would potentially include students who got 79.2, 79.4, and strictly speaking, they wouldn't qualify. So we need a rule that's more precise. Let's go to New Rule and make all the selections ourselves. We don't want to format all the cells in our range. We only want to format those that contain a particular set of values. So we click on Format Only Cells That Contain, and we want cell values that are greater than or equal to 80%. We type that as our criteria, and we'll tell Excel what we want these cells to look like by clicking on Format. Maybe we want a blue fill for all these cells, and let's make our font bold so it stands out. We click on OK, and here we have all the students who will be on the honor roll next year. We're done. Conditional formatting makes our data more visually appealing and makes important data stand out. In this lesson, we'll learn how to edit our workbook by adding, removing, or correcting data. Let's say we have this sheet with our office expenses, and we want to insert a column with the category of each expense after the name of the expense. that category would then become column B. There are two really simple ways to do this. The first way is to select the column heading to the right of where you want the new column to appear. So in this example, if we want to insert a column between A and B, we select column B. On the Home tab, we look for the Cells command group and click Insert. The new column will appear to the left. That was pretty easy. Actually, there's an even easier way. Let's Control Z. We start out the same way by selecting column B, right-click with our mouse, and the Insert command shows up. We click, and it's done. So let's say we've inserted our categories and filled in each one. Inserting a row is pretty much the same thing. We just select the row heading to the bottom of where we want the new row to appear, right-click, Insert, and it's done. Let's do that now. We want to add an expense for stationery, and we want it to show up between the salaries expense and the telephone expense. We hover over the telephone row header. That's row 11. We make sure that we have the black arrow showing up, right-click, and Insert. There we go. And let's type stationery. When inserting rows and columns, make sure that you select the entire row by clicking on the heading. If you only selected a cell within the row or column, then the Insert command will only insert one new cell, like this. And we don't want that. So let's Control Z to undo. And if you want to delete a row or column, just make sure that you select the row or the column by getting that black arrow, right-click, and delete. And it's gone. If you have large sets of data, but you don't need them all to be visible right now, you can hide entire rows or columns with a simple right-click. Let's hide our category column like this. We get our black arrow by hovering over the column name, right-click, and select Hide. We can tell that this row or column is hidden because that column name or row number will be missing from the sequence. There'll also be a double line indicating where the missing column or row is. To unhide, you can highlight the columns on either side of the hidden column, right-click, and select Unhide. Or you could hover over that double line, get your little black cross, and manually drag to expand the hidden column. If you have multiple rows that are hidden and you wanted to unhide them all at once, then you could just click on the little triangle just below the name box, right-click on any row, and select Unhide. Of course, the same would apply if you have hidden columns. Mastering these tasks should make it easier for you to manage large sets of data on a worksheet. The default Excel sheet name is Sheet 1, but we can give it a more descriptive name just by double-clicking and typing the new name straight into the Sheet tab. Let's double-click and call this sheet Suppliers. We can add a new sheet by clicking on the plus sign to the right of the last sheet name. Our new sheet is called Sheet 2, and we click and we get Sheet 3. We can also move sheets around by clicking on the Sheet tab and then dragging and dropping. So let's click on the Suppliers sheet, and we notice that when we drag a worksheet, we'll see a small arrow to indicate the new location of the sheet. We release, and our sheet is moved. What if you want to delete a sheet? That's easy too. We right-click on the sheet name, we click Delete, and it's gone. If there's data on your sheet and you try to delete, then you'll get a warning saying, Microsoft Excel will permanently delete the sheet. Do you want to continue? If you do want to continue, then press Delete. Otherwise, press Cancel. There's no way to undo deleting a sheet. Clicking Undo won't bring it back. So make sure before you hit Delete that you don't want the information on this sheet. So we don't want to delete our sheet here. We hit cancel. And like we said, if there's no data, then it will delete without warning. The options to insert, rename, or move sheets are also available when we right-click on the sheet name at the bottom of our workbook. So if we didn't want to drag and drop or double-click, we could right-click and insert, delete, or rename our sheet. Let's explore the Move or Copy option. Selecting Move or Copy Sheet gives us a dialog box where we can choose where we want this sheet to be moved to. So we can move our sheet to a new book, to an existing book that's open at the time that we're performing this action, or somewhere else within this workbook. If we want to copy this sheet, then we click on the checkbox that says Create a Copy, and the same options are available. We can create a copy of this sheet and put it in a brand new workbook, in an existing workbook that's currently open, or in the current workbook that we're working on. The default is to put it in the current workbook. And then we tell Excel exactly where within that workbook we'd like our copied sheet to be placed. Do we want it before this sheet, or do we want it at the end? Let's see what it would look like if we created a copy of this sheet. Excel has made an exact copy, so both sheets have the same data. They look the exact same. But the name of the copied sheet now has the name of the original sheet with the number 2 in parentheses. If you have data that you want to quickly organize, then sorting and filtering are your best friends. You can sort data by text, numbers, dates, and times, and even by multiple criteria. Let's sort this list of office expenses alphabetically by expense name. We'll just highlight the data set that we want sorted, go to the Data tab on our ribbon, and click the A to Z icon on the Sort and Filter command group. It's that simple. Ours was easy because we wanted to sort by the first column, and Excel recognized our headers, so everything turned out as expected. But what if our sorting requirements were a bit more detailed or complex? Like maybe we wanted to sort by the category and then by the cost within each category. In that case, we'd have to go to the Sort dialog box and tell Excel how we want our data sorted. Let's do that. We highlight our data set and go to the Sort icon. So we want our expenses sorted by category first. And we notice that Excel recognizes that our data has headers, so it excluded it from the highlighted section that it's about to sort. If we unchecked that box, then Excel would treat row 4 just like all the other rows and sort it with the values below. We don't want that, so let's recheck the box. My data has headers. And we start by sorting the category column, and we are sorting based on cell values in an A to Z order. That's alphabetically. Additionally, we want the expenses within each category to be sorted by their cost. So let's add a level and click the total cost column in the order of largest to smallest. We click OK, and there we have it. All the accommodation, employee, transportation, and utility expenses are together, and each one is sorted by their cost. What if we temporarily only wanted to see a certain set of data without deleting the other data? We can filter out what we don't want and display only the data we're interested in seeing for now by using a filter. We can start by clicking anywhere within that data set that we want to create a filter for. If we click on the filter icon in the Sort and Filter command group, Excel will then create a filter arrow in the first row of the data set. If this isn't where you wanted your filter to be, just highlight the row that you want to treat as your header row and click on the filter icon, like this. Highlight and click Filter. Generally speaking, if you have blank rows within your data set, Excel will assume that your data set ends just before the blank row and a new data set starts after the blank row. Let's do that now. Let's remove this filter and create a blank row here. if we click below that blank row and click on the filter icon, Excel will assume that this is a new data set. So let's undo that filter. So if you want your filter to include all the data that follows your blank rows, then manually highlight the entire data set, blanks and all, when creating your filter. Click on your filter icon, and it will include the data below your blank rows too. Each header row has a drop-down menu, which includes a list of unique values that you can choose to filter your data by. Any box that's unchecked will be filtered out of your display. So if I only want to see the utilities category of expenses, then I can deselect all, then click Utilities. I hit OK, and I'm only seeing the utilities expenses for now. As you can see from the blue row numbers, the other data is still there. They're just hidden for the time being. You'll also see that there's an option to view blank rows, if there are blank rows within your dataset. And then if you want to see everything again, then you can just look for which column had filters applied. That's this one. Click on the down arrow, select all, click OK, and your data is showing up again. And if you want to remove the filter arrows altogether, just click on the filter icon, and the arrows are gone. You can turn your rows and columns of data into visual representations with charts or graphs. Though a graph isn't technically a chart, in Excel the words graph and chart are used interchangeably. Charts are an effective way to summarize and visually present statistics. You can create a chart right inside Excel without having to export it into some other tool. There are lots of ways to represent numbers in a way that tell a story. Bar graphs and pie charts are two of the most commonly used. Let's create a chart to compare the number of items sold at our stationery store. First, it's a good idea to ensure that your number formats are correct. If you have numbers or time formatted as text, Excel may not know what to do with them when it's creating your chart. So let's check on our items sold here and look at our number format. It says General for each one. And let's check on the price of our items and the total sales. These are formatted as accounting, so they look good. The next step is to select the cells you want to use as your source data. For our chart, we'll want to select the column with the name of each item, and we also want to select the number of each item sold for this quarter. Because these two columns aren't adjacent to each other, we can't simply drag all the way across. So after we select the name of the items and release our mouse, we press the Control key on our keyboard, or Command key if we're using a Mac, and while still holding that key, we select the other range with the data that we want, the Q1 item sold. We release, and with both columns selected, we go to the Insert tab on the Excel ribbon. We take a look at the Charts command group, and there are lots of charts available. If we hover over each one, we'll get a description of when to use this type of chart. Better yet, the recommended charts suggest the most suitable chart for this type of data you selected. Let's click on that. And we get a dialog box where we get to see what our data will look like if we choose that chart. And there are more charts in the All Charts tab of this dialog box. And we can click through and select the one that's right for us. Let's go back to the recommended charts and select this column chart. We hit OK, and the chart is created within the sheet where our source data exists. One thing we notice is that the chart title takes the title that came with our items sold, which is okay, but what if we wanted another chart title? Well, we can customize the name of our chart by clicking on the title box and typing the chart title into the formula bar. So let's say we just wanted to call it Items Sold. We hit that and it becomes our chart title. Alternatively, we can create a dynamic chart title that's linked to a cell in our worksheet. Let's click on the chart title, and if we type an equal sign and click on that cell, then whatever is displayed in that cell will become the title of our chart. If the cell contains a formula, then the result of the formula will be your chart title, not the formula itself. So let's hit OK, and our chart title is Sal's Stationery Store Sales. If the value of this cell changes, like if we take off the word sales and hit enter, then the chart title is now Sal's Stationery Store. Another thing we notice is that now that we have a chart within our worksheet, clicking on that chart gives us two Chart Tools tabs on our ribbon, namely the Design tab and the Format tab. These are called contextual tabs, meaning they only show up when a particular object is selected, in this case, a chart. They're not activated when we select something other than a chart. So if we click outside of the chart, those tabs go away. Let's explore how to use the Chart Tools tabs in our next lesson. One of the main reasons for working with charts is usually because we want to establish a trend or a relationship where words or numbers are less effective or less obvious. If your chart doesn't do this, you may be using the wrong chart for that type of data. And that's why Excel has a variety of chart types to choose from. Here we have a column chart, which really doesn't add much value to the data that was already recorded on our worksheet. We already knew the number of each item sold, so we're not learning anything new by looking at this chart. Maybe if we changed what was being reported, our chart would tell a more visually interesting story. Let's look back at our source data to see what questions these numbers could answer. Could we find out whether there was any month that was better than the others? We click on our chart and we see that our contextual Chart Tools tabs are available. When we click on the Design tab, an option to select our data shows up in the Data command group. We click that, and for the chart data range, instead of using the total items sold, let's select the 3 months, January, February, and March. We could manually type the range in, but why do that when we can easily select the relevant range right here on the worksheet? And it's entered within the dialog box. We noticed before we hit OK that Excel will create a legend for January, February, and March, and that the horizontal axis labels will be the items for sale: books, crayons, erasers, and so on. If there was any data that we didn't care to see, we'd uncheck them and they wouldn't show up on our chart. But we do want to see them all, so we recheck and click OK. Now we have our chart, but we're not seeing the name of each month, and we'd much rather see that because we're comparing sales by month. Did we do something wrong? Not really. It's just a matter of the chart layout. We can go up to the Chart Layouts command group and click on the Quick Layout drop-down to see if any of the pre-built layouts work for us. Hovering over each layout gives you a preview of your own chart, and if you like it, just click and it's updated. We want our chart to be informative but not cluttered, so right now let's go back to Layout 1. And our chart is created. We have the legend with our 3 months here. One thing that we learned from this chart is that with the exception of marker sales, February was a good month for sales. All the other items did the same or better than January and March. And maybe we can start asking questions like, what event or events may have contributed to this? Is this true of all Februaries? How did we do last February? Can we expect the same next February? Maybe our analysis will reveal that we actually ran out of markers, and so we should have ordered more. We could have and still can further customize our chart by clicking on the Add Chart Element command within that same command group. And we see options to add more elements to our chart. A shortcut to add or remove chart elements is this green plus sign right next to our chart, and hovering over each one shows what your chart will look like. We don't want to add any more elements to our chart. We're happy with the way it looks now. We can also change chart colors or styles from the Chart Styles command group. And if we decide that this isn't the best type of chart to represent our data, we can always click the Change Chart Type command. And we'll be presented with the same list that we got when we created this chart initially. But let's say we're satisfied with our chart. We click OK. And if we want to move it out of the way and start working on another chart to tell another story, we can place this chart on its own sheet or in whatever location we choose by clicking on the Move Chart command. That's located here. And we can place our chart in its own new sheet or as an object within our current sheet. Let's put it in its own sheet and we'll call it Column Chart. We click OK, and that chart is by itself. We notice that it's placed right before the sheet with our source data. So we go back to our source data to start telling another story. Another popular chart type is pie charts. Pie charts are generally used to show proportions or percentages. We can easily see from our data set that markers accounted for the bulk of our sales revenue this quarter. But what percentage was it? Well, if you do some quick mental math, you'll probably figure that it's about a third, but it gets trickier for other numbers which are smaller. And anyway, there's no need to do all that mental math when the Excel charts can calculate and show us the numbers we want. So as usual, we select the range for our data, which is going to be the items. We Control or Command and select the sales totals. We go to our Insert tab, and we know that we want a pie chart, so we click on the pie chart drop-down, and we can choose from 2D, 3D, and donut pies. Let's do a 2D pie. That's the most common one. We click OK, and this looks pretty basic. We already know how to add the extra elements we want. We can also go to the Quick Layout for pre-built layouts, or customize by adding the chart elements with the green plus sign. Let's go to the Quick Layout and see if there's any that we like. We hover, and we're taking a look at what our data will look like. We do like Layout 1 because it has a chart title, series names, and the percentages we're looking for. And if there's anything on this chart that we want to make more visible, then it's really just a click away. So let's click on Layout number 1. We see that the rulers element is not that visible because it's almost the same color as the background. So we can do one of two things. We can either click on this element and drag it outside to make it more visible. Or if we wanted it to stay within the chart, we could highlight by selecting and changing the color, maybe to white, so it's obvious. And that's what our chart looks like. What if we wanted to talk specifically about marker sales? Then we could click on that element and explode it from our chart if we want to visually talk about marker sales. We Control Z to put that back in. The Format tab on the Chart Tools allows multiple changes to the look and feel of any chart that you create. If you click on the element that you're looking to restyle, let's say you want to restyle the title of your chart, and you can apply any of the available options. There are word art styles, so we're hovering over each one. And if we wanted to change this to this style, then we just click on that. But if we feel that we want to go back to the overall visual theme and style of the document, we just click on the Reset to Match Style command, and we're good as new. If you've created a file from scratch, naturally you'll want to save your data so you can come back to it later. It's not that different from any other Microsoft document. You use Save As to save your file for the first time, and Save to preserve any changes to the document after that. But what if you wanted to set up your file for printing? Well, that's a little different from Microsoft Word and PowerPoint. Those programs, for the most part, actively try to format your information to fit onto pages of a certain size. But due to the nature of Excel goes to over 1 million rows and over 16,000 columns, then you can easily see that the data you type will probably turn out other than you expect unless you format your page layout yourself. So before attempting to print, it's a good idea to go to the View tab. Within the Workbook Views command group, there are a few options for how we want to look at our worksheet. The first thing to remember is that you can make changes to the content of your worksheet as normal while you're working in any view. They're just alternative ways to look at your worksheet. The default is normal, which is the view that we've been working with. Let's look at the others. First, the page break preview. This view emphasizes where your pages will be broken. Let's click on that, and we see that dotted lines show where the automatic page breaks will be, and the solid lines show the manual breaks. If you move the automatic page breaks, then they're displayed as solid lines because then they become manual breaks. And the outer limits of our page are displayed as solid lines too. We Control Z to undo our last action, and we've restored our natural page break. Page numbers are displayed as gray watermarks, so we have page 1 and page 2 here. As you can see, the setup for this sheet isn't ideal because some of our data is spilling over from page 1 to page 2, and this is definitely not what we want. We have a couple of options. The first temptation is just to drag the automatic page break all the way over to the end of our data set. Everything now fits on one sheet, it's all page 1, so everything looks great. But what exactly did we just do? Let's see. We go to our Page Layout tab, and we see that what we've done is to reduce our printout scale to 78% of its original size. This may work fine for some pieces of data, but it may be a bad idea for others, depending on what your data is and how good and useful it'll be at that scaled down size. For this document, maybe 78% isn't such a good idea because it has lots of numbers and text. So let's go back to our 100%, and we still have the problem of data spilling over into a second page. Well, another option is just to change our page orientation. Let's do that. Maybe your data would fit better on a landscape size page than on portrait. Let's click Landscape, and it does. It fits perfectly. So that's a good solution for this data type. Let's take a look at our third view, the page layout view. This view is somewhat similar to the page break view in that it shows you where the page breaks are. We can zoom in. Right now it's showing 55% because it wants to show us the entire page, but we can zoom in a little more so that we can see our data. Now we're at 75%. The page layout view also shows us our ruler, making it easy to adjust page margins, and it enables us to add headers and footers. The header is a section of the workbook that appears in the top margin, and the footer appears in the bottom margin. Headers and footers are printed on your document, so you can type whatever you like within your header, and it will appear as a title, and you can format this to the size and font of your choice. So let's create a header here. Let's call it Top Achievers, and since it's a title, let's make it a little bigger. So we can make this 16 point and maybe bold. And that will be our header when our page is printed. If we go back to page layout, we can also choose to print our grid lines and our headings. This means that when our sheet is printed, it will print with these lines and it will print with the ABC columns and the 1, 2, 3 row numbers. If we don't want that, then we just uncheck and they won't be shown. Since you've stuck around this long, let's share some handy tips for doing common tasks within Excel. Let's say you want to apply a particular format to all your cells at once, and it would just take too long to click on the first cell and drag all the way down to the last cell in your data set. Well, here's a shortcut that selects every cell within your worksheet with one click. Click on the corner button in the upper left corner of your worksheet, like this, and every cell is selected. Any action you do now is applied to all the data on your sheet. Let's make all the text here red. And it's done. Of course, we don't like this red font, so let's change it back. We'll do Control Z to undo what we just did. Okay, so maybe you'd already picked up on that one. How about this one? To select an entire data set, go within the data set, and do Control asterisk. This entire data set is selected. Or let's say you're within the data set and you'd like to select everything within that column all the way to the bottom. Control, Shift, and the down arrow selects everything from your current cell to the bottom of your data set. What if you wanted to select everything to the right of your current cell? Well, it's Control, Shift, and your right arrow key. And if you wanted to select everything to the left, it's Control, Shift, and the left arrow key. You get the picture. Now you already know how to insert a single row or column. But if you need to add several, just do it in one entry by clicking on the equivalent number of columns or rows that you want to add. Let's say you want to insert 3 rows above row 11. Then you'd go to row 11, make sure you get your black arrow, select 3 rows going downward, right-click, and insert. You've got 3 rows inserted above row 11. Let's Control Z to undo. The process is the same for columns. If you wanted to insert 3 columns to the left of column C, you'd make sure you get your black arrow at column C, select 3 columns going right, right-click, and insert. Let's undo. The cool thing is that this even works for non-adjacent rows and cells. If you wanted to insert 1 row here above row 8 and 1 row above row 13, you'd Control to select row 13 and 1 row above row 18, Control 18. Now you have all 3 selected, right-click, insert, and you've got 3 rows inserted right where you want to. This can save you lots of time. Let's Control Z. Here's a way to quickly jump to the end of your data set. If you type Control and the down arrow, then you've jumped to the bottom of your data set. If you click Control and the up arrow, you're at the top. And if you do Control and the right arrow, you're at the end of the data set to your right. We also want to share this little known function to convert text to the case you want, whether that's uppercase, lowercase, or title case. Maybe your data is coming from somewhere that it's in a case that you don't want, maybe like what we're looking at here. Our item descriptions are all in uppercase, but we'd much rather see them in title case. Here's a really cool way to do this. We go to an empty cell, and we type this function, equals proper, if we want it in title case, open parentheses, the cell reference that we're trying to convert, close parentheses, and now we have each word from the original cell converted to title case. We'd like to do this for all the items within our price list, so let's copy this formula by double-clicking on the fill handle. So this looks the way we want, but we'd like to get this information over into column B. Now we remember that we're looking at a formula here. So if we copy this and put it here, well, that's a problem because that's a circular reference. What we can do is to copy and paste the value instead of the formula. Here's how to do this. We already have the cells highlighted. We can just hit copy here. And when we're about to paste, we right-click and select values from our paste options. Click on paste values, and now our product descriptions are converted from uppercase to title case. That's pretty cool. Let's delete. If we wanted everything in lowercase, we would do equals lower, open parentheses, cell reference, and close parentheses. Everything is in lowercase. And if we wanted everything to be back in uppercase, equals upper, open parentheses, cell reference, close parentheses, and we're done. This function can come in pretty handy if you do lots of importing of text. So we like the way column B looks now. Let's delete what's in column D. Here's something you'll notice sooner or later. On our worksheet, This customer's account number starts with a 0, but Excel removed the leading 0 by default because it recognizes that this is a number and knows that a leading 0 has no value. But when your leading 0 is the beginning of an employee ID number, an account number, or a product code, maybe you'd like it to be displayed. This problem can easily be solved by adding a single quote mark ahead of the first 0. Let's click on that cell, hit F2 to get inside, and go to the beginning of that number. We type our single quote mark and a 0 and enter. Now our 0 shows up, but notice the green triangle in the upper left corner of the cell. When we click on that cell and hover over the error message, it says the number in this cell is formatted as text or preceded by an apostrophe. Of course, if you know that the data in this cell, column, or row will always have a leading 0, it makes sense to change the format to text altogether. But for now, we can click on the error drop-down and select Ignore Error, and we're happy. Finally, here's a super useful function, the Today function. This function returns the current date formatted based on the location settings of your computer. Let's enter this function as the date of our quotation. We simply type equals and today. Notice that while we're typing functions, Excel is helping us along by suggesting the function or functions it thinks you're typing in. If we press on the Tab key, it'll complete the name of the first function on the list and the open parenthesis. We just need to finish up by entering the arguments and the close parenthesis. In the case of the Today function, no additional arguments are necessary, so we type our close parenthesis, hit Enter, and today's date is displayed. The Today function is dynamic, so each time we open this document, the date of the quotation will be the date we opened the document. Now we want our quotations to be valid for 14 days, so in this cell, we can type a formula. We start with equals, click on cell D3, plus 14, and enter. We also want our dates to be non-ambiguous, so let's select both cells. We click on D3, Control, D8. Let's choose a date format that's universally understood. We press Control 1 to get our number formats window, and we select the date category. Let's scroll down to find a date format that we like. Let's choose this one. We hit OK. And now we have our quotation looking just the way we want. So can you believe it? You've gone from Excel 0 to Excel Hero. You can now create formulas, apply special number formats, add and remove worksheets, apply conditional formatting, sort and filter data, and visually tell stories from your data using charts. If you haven't already done so, you'll want to challenge yourself by using our downloadable practice exercises and probably even experimenting with a few scenarios of your own. Visit our course catalog to check out more cool ways that Excel can help you to work smarter.
Ready to learn more about Microsoft Excel? Check out the full range of Excel courses now available at GoSkills.com. Click the link in the description.